Typical 100-watt solar panel, it's somewhere around 5 amps and 18 volts. It's not such a great day, as you can see, and we're going to try and get power out of this. You've likely seen several videos of people using buck converters. I have this is my favorite 150-watt inverter, and this is kind of unique because this is actually my favorite, and this does not put out AC, it puts out DC, which is very quiet, very nice for doing my audio-visual electronics and stuff. So from the meter we can tell we're putting in 18 volts into this, and on the inverter it says 11.9 volts. Okay, lighting the bulb, and I'm pulsing it. I'm pulsing it at 120 hertz because that simulates 60 cycle, and I'm only at, if you notice, 7% duty cycle. And that's because, well, I'm trying to limit the power, but normally with an MSW inverter, you would have an on-duty cycle of around 67%, and that relates close to 50% on and off. So, yeah, we can barely even power this. It's 100 watt. It's at 12.6 watts. And looking at the scope, absolutely the worst scope in the world. I hate this thing. As a scope, if I had this when I was starting out in electronics, I would have quit. I would have never continued. This thing is so frustrating to use. Don't ever get one of these because it's absolutely terrible. I can never figure out what it's doing. And if you change the settings on it, time-based settings, you will get different images that have nothing related to what the thing is actually doing. So anyways, I have a switch right here and a big capacitor. What people don't tell you when you use this, and it's actually on this on the label on the side, it says do not use this with an inverter. And the reason is because this has little capacitors inside. As you can see, this is a little bigger and it won't fit in the case. When we switch this capacitor off, we get 5 volts of ripple. 5 volts of ripple on 18 volts. That's a lot. Actually, I'm going to increase this duty cycle a little bit because the sun just came out for a moment. Okay, we're about 17.5 volts. And right now, we're getting almost 7 volts of ripple. And that will destroy the capacitors inside. But not only that, basically you're taking all the power that the panel can produce at the time that the on pulse is on. And if you have a sine wave inverter, it's only drawing the maximum current at the peaks. And in between, this is why I do in water heating, I store up the energy during the off cycles to add to the solar panel in the on cycle. So adding a capacitor will actually give you more watts, and it'll protect it from blowing up. So that's the main point of this video. That is an awful lot of ripple. We just switch this on. You can see the ripple goes down to about nothing. This is a 65,000 microfarad capacitor. This is pretty large, but I wanted to use something very large to give the best example. If you get around 15,000 on the input, that'll be sufficient enough to protect the capacitors on the inside of this. And you should also add extra capacitors on the output, because the capacitors in this are only large enough to make this thing stable, to keep it from oscillating. And they expect that you're going to be running this into a low impedance source like a battery, so you don't need a lot of capacitance because the battery is taking care of it. and they really don't expect you to be doing a lot of pulsing on the outside. And if you put a larger capacitor on the outside, it'll work much better. But on this input, a smaller capacitance with a higher voltage will do much more filtering. But again, look at that ripple. That is going to destroy this over time. And that's what nobody tells you, because they open a box, put things on, and it works for 5 minutes, and they say, great. But they don't show you someone actually operating something in a bad state. So here we have, I'm going to increase this a little bit. So we can probably get up around 27 watts with this. So it's 29, you're still at 18 volts. So I'm getting 30 watts out of a 100 watt panel, and I'm at 23%. And to actually get full power, like I say, this would have to be up around the 60% region if your panel is in absolute bright sunlight. That's pretty amazing. You know, nobody shows you what happens when a panel is not in full sunlight, and it gets kind of ugly. But that's reality. Most of the time you won't be in bright sunlight, and so don't count your chickens before they hatch.